Southeast sports fans? Hanna Barton, joined by Brenden, Schaeffer. Today, we've got your 2025 Florida Gators preview. Now, at one point last season, it looked like Billy Napier maybe wasn't going to be in Gainesville still, Brenden, but seemed to turn things around the end of the season. And now we've got some pretty high expectations, it sounds like, around the Gators.
Yeah, Hannah, it was really interesting the way that Florida's season went last year. It started off so slowly, and you lose in a rivalry game to Miami. You lose big. You have a conference game against Texas A&M that felt like a pretty bad blowout. But honestly, after that, Florida was pretty well competitive in just about everything other than that Texas game, which you didn't have DJ Lagway for. And that is going to be, I think, the biggest topic of conversation for this coming season. Is DJ Lagway healthy, and how long will he stay healthy is going to go a long way in determining what kind of season the Florida Gators have, because he's a special player that they uncovered last year at the quarterback position. He burst onto the scene and did some really special things when they had him, but they didn't always have him. And already in this training camp period, he's missed a lot of time. Now, this week, as we're recording, he's back at practice, back to taking team reps, and hopefully on the road to being the quarterback one that he's supposed to be. However, if there should be any more injury issues for Lagway, that could throw things pretty much into a tizzy for the Florida Gators, because they have another gauntlet of a schedule in 2025.
Yeah, there really is a lot of pressure on DJ Lagway. We go back a few years ago under the final season with Dan Mullen, and the losses, 26 losses from that season until this most recent season. That was the worst 4-year run for Gator football in the last 40 years or so. So the Florida program, while yes, they seem to turn things around last season, hasn't quite been up to kind of the normal Gator standard. And now they kind of turn to DJ Lagway, number one quarterback prospect for 2024. Again, the health is the big question. Wasn't able to throw a lot because of the shoulder in the spring. Now we've seen him in a boot this summer leading into season. If he can get healthy, and like you said, Brenden, it's stay healthy, because they've got a schedule that is going to need him to peak and not be hanging on by maybe some athletic tape, come week 3. Even when we get to the schedule, we'll see against LSU. Now, he has some weapons. He's got some size and explosiveness in the backfield. You've got Jadon Ball, Jacoby Jackson. They return a strong O-line. Their center, All-American Jake Slaughter's back. But again, it all kind of comes down to, if DJ Lagway isn't healthy and doesn't stay healthy, is this offense going to be even remotely the same?
Yeah, there's definitely some question marks if they have to turn to anybody other than Lagway. But it's kind of interesting the way that last season unfolded. I think there was this sort of air of, oh man, what another bad season for the Florida Gators, because it couldn't have started any worse than it did. But, you can take them in kind of segments and say in the middle of the season that they beat up on the teams they were supposed to beat. They lost to some of the top 10 teams that they were supposed to lose to, and that's disappointing for sure. But like, the way they finished the season, I think should give Florida fans a lot of confidence that, hey, if you're able to have your full complement of talent and Billy Napier is coaching them up, that run to finish the season of wins over LSU, over Ole Miss, and over Florida State, I think has people excited. And it's a reason that when you look at, as we'll get into a little bit later on from the betting angle, the win total of 7.5, you see room above that potentially, even with the daunting schedule that they have. I think offensively, yeah, it does start with Lagway, but he does have what he needs to be successful. You mentioned some of the studs on the offensive line. I think the running game is going to be pretty talented, and the wide receiving core, there's some younger names that could be in there. Sturdivant is one of their wide receivers that should be a big-time difference maker for them on the outside. I think they've got enough in each area of the roster on that side of the ball to really be able to, so long as they have their quarterback, be a pretty consistent offense, because that was the problem last year. You'd have the big games, but then you'd have the games where it really fell off.
Yeah, what also was a little bit inconsistent was that defense. You saw where kind of they got those blowouts in the middle of the season. Defense was really, really struggling. Then they go on that 4-game win streak at the end of the season, and defense put out 38 tackles for loss, 19 sacks, 12 takeaways. So the defense showed that it has a lot of promise after collapsing early in the season. So the question is this the defense that's going to show up game one, or is it going to take a while for the defense to kind of catch up, especially depending on what's going on the offense?
Yeah, and you don't want the offense to be putting your defense in a bad position, right? If they're not able to sustain drives and stay on the field, suddenly the target on the back of that defense gets even larger. And I just don't think that they were in a position last year where they were able to contend with that and manage that as a defensive unit. But the Florida Gators are always going to recruit talent on that side of the ball. They're going to have athletes on the defense. You just want that to turn into more production this year. Up and down resulted in ranking 75th last year in yards per game allowed as a defense. So that's kind of like right in the middle and really more toward the bottom half of college football. And that's just not really where this Florida team needs to be. And it can't be there with the type of offenses that they're going to be facing in 2025.
Back taking a look at the schedule now for the Florida Gators. DraftKings Sportsbook has the win total at 7.5. Brenden, as you're taking a look at this schedule, where do you see those wins and losses coming in?
Yeah, it's not an easy one. And again, last year they finished strong to where they made their bowl game. They had a respectable season for sure, performed well in that bowl game. Like again, the 4-game winning streak to end the season gives people a lot of excitement about what could be coming this year. But conference wise, you played the same teams that you played last year, and that was definitely a gauntlet. Granted, you flip the locations. And so a game like at Texas becomes a little bit more interesting in 2025 when you can play that one in the swamp. That's a really talented team, but that's a really tough environment to go into. And so I think that could be where Florida's advantage comes perhaps a little bit relative to last year, is a game like that being at home. You get the Tennessee game at home. That's another key conference matchup later on in the schedule. Circle that LSU game though, because you start the season with a FCS opponent and then South Florida. Those should be 2 wins for this year's version of the Gators. LSU, a conference game in week 3, that is going to be where we learn a lot about what this Florida team is made of, because they'll have tough road games too. You got to go to A&M. You got to go to Ole Miss. You get maybe a bit of a reprieve with that 4th road game being at Kentucky. For me, if this Florida team is going to do more than just try to contend with its 7.5 win total, you've got to count the games like at Kentucky as wins, home against Mississippi State. A lot of teams in the conference are going to try to be beating up on the Bulldogs while they're down. Florida should be no different. LIU, South Florida, that gets you to 4. You do get to host Florida State, but like I think we've even talked about it in previous previews with these SEC teams that have to play Florida State. Yeah, you kind of figure, oh, they're down on their luck right now. You can't necessarily count on that being an automatic W, especially in a rivalry game against the Seminoles to finish off the season. So there's really no breaks other than the 2 I mentioned, Mississippi State and Florida. You've got every other conference game that's going to be remarkably difficult. And you have to go, I believe, to Miami this year to return the favor for last year's game in Gainesville that didn't go their way. So there's a realm where you go, yeah, there's 4 wins I can count. If you lose all the games that are toss-ups or below, you're 4-8. I think there's enough talent on this Florida Gators team, and I think they're going to have a quarterback advantage in a lot of these matchups to be able to contend to get to at least that 7 or 8 win mark. They want more than that, though. I mean, the tradition of this program is such that they have expectations to, doesn't matter who's on their schedule. You go on the road, you beat LSU. You host Texas, and you win it. And maybe that's how they start the season, 5-0. Guess what? They're a top 5 team in the country if that happens. But it's a big if, because the schedule is difficult, and we just have questions about how much will it cost Florida that DJ Lagway missed all that time in camp? Is he going to be ready, and is he going to last the whole season? If I could know that for sure, I'd feel pretty comfortable going over 7.5 wins for the Gators. Not knowing that makes it a little bit difficult and makes me less comfortable thinking about that number.
Brennan, I almost wonder if those first 2 games, because those are pretty much gimmies for Florida, are we maybe going to see DJ Lagway a little bit less those 2 games, make sure he's ready and feeling fresh for LSU? Because again, that stretch of LSU, Miami, Texas, Texas A&M, and then you get one little, maybe let the foot off the gas a little bit with Mississippi State at home, but then you go right back into a pretty solid stretch, taking out Kentucky. But I mean, they're going to want him to not only be able to play well against LSU, against Miami, but also against Tennessee at home and against Florida State at home.
Yeah, and I understand that idea, but with how much time he's missed, like the valuable reps that he's missed from camp, I don't know if you can afford to say, "Oh, let's ease him in." Yeah, against an FCS opponent week 1, I think that's always pretty much going to be every power conference team's ideal for a game. You play a half and then you're out because the lead is it's insurmountable. But that South Florida game needs to be a real ramp up where I think they need to DJ Lagway needs to let it eat. Like if you can beat South Florida 45-7, you do that, and you do it largely with DJ Lagway playing the majority of that game because I think he's going to need the reps because last season was a stop start up and down type of affair because of the injuries that he dealt with. It's not usually just one part on the body either that DJ Lagway is dealing with. So for him to be able to get those meaningful reps in there somewhere before the real gauntlet of a schedule, because you mentioned it, there's kind of two stretches. It's that first one that starts kind of with the LSU game. And then you have the Georgia, you have the cocktail party that's difficult, but it's kind of in between a couple of more manageable games on the schedule. But then it finishes at Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State. So there's nowhere really to hide for long on this schedule, and that just means when you've got an opportunity to get meaningful reps in a game that's a little less pressurized, like that South Florida contest, I think it's going to need to be a really kind of a showcase game for the Florida offense to make sure it is firing on all cylinders, because you can't replicate what they're going to experience when they go down to Death Valley for that LSU game. You just have to make sure that your guys are as prepared as possible, and they've experienced it. They've gotten the reps to be able to go down there and put their best foot forward.
If I'm a Florida Gators fan, if I'm an SEC fan, if I'm a college football fan, I'm looking at that LSU, Miami, Texas stretch, and I'm excited because that's going to be a quarterback battle. That's where we're really going to see, like, how's DJ Lagway performing compared to Garrett Nussmeier, compared to Carson Beck, compared to Arch Manning. I mean, these are names that have all been thrown out in the Heisman, favorites. Beck more so previously in his college career, but it's still not written off now. And so those are three games that if you're a college football fan, I'm circling those three going, all right, this is going to be a chance to watch two high-level quarterbacks as long as both are healthy and, see really what this Florida defense too is about, because they're going to go against some strong offenses in that those stretch as well. So Brenden, as I'm looking at this schedule, where are you kind of deciding to go in win total?
Yeah, 7.5. I've got to pick a side. I like the Gators' chances against Miami. I think that's going to be a game that feels very personal for the guys that were on last year's team and the way it started off their season on such a sour note early. I think that's one that they'll end up getting between that stretch of it's LSU and then the Miami non-con game. Then you go Texas and A&M. If I can give them Miami and find a way to get at least one of LSU, Texas, and Texas A&M, I think I have a way to feel pretty comfortable about over 7.5. And like, there's no game I'm going to count the Gators out from. I'm not going to count them out against Georgia in the cocktail party. I'm not going to count them out, even though they have to go to LSU and face Lane Kiffin. Like, they beat them last year. So I feel okay about going over 7.5. I actually think I really do like that number because I'm going to err on the side of believing in DJ Lagway. I will come to regret this decision if he doesn't get through the season healthy. I'm just basically rolling with the kid. We got to see him at SEC Media Days. He lights up a room. He's got the personality. He's got the talent. He just needs to stay on the field. I'm going to err on the side of believing in the kid. And if that's the case, they get to 8-4. The question, though, Hanna, is whether they can go beyond that. Yeah, I like over 7.5. But when you get to a legit win total and predicting the record, can college football playoff be on the table? I'm sure is going to be a conversation for this program.
What win total are you putting to say, all right, Billy Napier, he's safe for another year in Gainesville?
Yeah, like if you clear the 7.5, it's no question. I think even a 7-5 record probably could keep him around, but also I would need to know more about the circumstances of how did you arrive at 7-5 instead of 8-4, 9-3, or above. Did DJ Lagway miss 4 games and you go 1-3 in that stretch, but you clean up with the rest? There are some circumstances that I believe could keep it, but they really would like to see a step forward this year. I think realistically, the true vault into being like a perennial top 10 program under Napier, if it's going to happen, which I believe it could, I think that may have to wait until next year when they get a different dang schedule, because all they're doing this year is playing last year's schedule and switching the locations. And last year's schedule was historically difficult. And so 7-5, 8-4, I think is more than enough. If you go 6-6, though, I do think that there are going to be some people in Gainesville going, all right, how long are we going to wait for this? Is it ever coming?
Well, we'll have to see how the Gators fare this season, if it's enough to keep Napier around. Of course, we're going to continue to follow the Florida Gators and all the other SEC teams throughout the season. But for now, this was your 2025 Florida Gators preview. Thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to Southeast Sports Fans, and we'll see you guys next time.